Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Uncommon Sense number 11. Craig Kamanis and Dean Holmes with you again. Very excited about today's session. Dean, how are you going today, mate?
Very good. Thank you, Craig. Great to be here and have some fun again and have a really good conversation that hopefully will help advisors and practices think about their options going forward.
Exactly. And for those of you playing along at home, you can see that Dean's now made the minimum entry requirement to be a co-host a beard. So I've conformed into line so that we can make sure that we're meeting those requirements. So, but today, mate, it's an interesting conversation that we want to have, and I want to declare up front that this isn't about saying you should be licensed or you should have your own AFSL. It's not here to push people one way or the other, but it's just the conversation that is going around a lot at the moment, and I'm hearing lots of different people think about is, do I go self-licensed? Or do I pick an AFSL and go that way? And the one driver, Dean, that I think is really bringing this up is I hear lots of people say, I need flexibility. I feel like I've been in such a stringent regime for so long.
Mm.
It's not benefiting my business, so I need flexibility. And when I pose that, well, what does flexibility mean question, no one can really answer it.
I
Um,
feel I feel like it's a little bit like if you recall, like when self-managed. This might be 5 to 10 years ago. That self-managed super funds became all the rage, and the reason why people set them up was flexibility. And then what happened is the rest of the industry caught up to self-managed super funds, and so you can actually do almost everything outside of a self-managed super fund as inside. And so flexibility is not only a timing thing. So we might talk about that in terms of when do you need flexibility and where do you need flexibility. So I just see it changing all of the time.
Yep. And so, like I said, Dean, I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do this. This is a very personal decision and really depends on your business and where it's at. But the one driving force that sits in my mind, and this is because, helping my son with a year 11 economics assignment on the weekend, opportunity cost comes up,
Mm.
and working through opportunity cost. And I thought, that's why today it would be great to pick your brain on this, because you have ran your own AFSL. You obviously run an advice business, and you've also had that advice business now under a license as well. So really not focusing so much on should you be licensed or should you be self-licensed, but more on your journey and your experience around the opportunity cost of
Mm. Mm.
both, and
Yeah,
where that's
yeah.
kind of landed you today. So, mate, over to
Ab-
you to share that.
Absolutely. And so I think the most important thing for me to define a couple of things that in terms of our journey as well, but also the couple of different things is that I think that there's a concept of being self-licensed. And so to me that means one practice with one AFSL. Okay. And then there is the next evolution that might happen over time, which I hear really often is someone who is self-licensed, they go, oh, if I license the guy down the road, I'll get $30,000. And so therefore that'll offset some of my costs. And so
Mm,
that is moving into what I'll call like the micro dealer group. In that you've become a dealer group because you're licensing someone external. And we'll go through a lot of that in a lot of detail. And then there's like this mid range, which might be 20 to maybe 20 to 100, and then 100 and above. And so I've had the journey of being in all of those at different points in time. But the vast majority of my career was in self-licensed, i.e. Absolute Wealth Advisors had its own AFSL. And then we moved into the licensing of advisors. And then we moved out of that world and moved into a licensee that has, 80 to 100 authorized reps and much bigger in the overall mothership. And that's been a completely different journey as well.
yep.
And so that opportunity cost is the really interesting one, Craig, because most people think about that I talk about, and you would talk about more as well, about setting up their own AFSL is that flexibility thing. which we can go into. And then they talk about the cost savings. And really, what they do on the back of the envelope is they say, well, I'm paying $50,000 a year in dealer fees. So therefore, if I can run my license for $50,000 or less, I must be ahead. And our biggest learning, especially in the last 3 years, in terms of the changing legislation, but it was there for a long time as well, is that it actually is a huge time investment to run your own AFSL, be it to be self-licensed or that mini dealer group. The time factor, I think it's undervalued in
Yep.
terms of doing it correctly, um, in the industry. And so, yes, you might be able to run the business for $50,000, and that's the same as your dealer fees. But you're not recognizing the time that it's going to take from yourself, as the responsible manager, to put effort into running the business. And it's also not going to allow you to do other things with that time. Right?
Mm.
So one of the greatest things that Stella in our business ever told Paul was to stop doing things and go get another client, because
Yeah. Okay.
that was the most valuable thing that he could do, and everything else could be done by someone else. And
Yep.
so that's an interesting concept to look through, is to go, well, sure, I can run my own AFSL, but how many more clients could I get if I didn't run my own AFSL? Now, not saying it's good or bad. That's what we're saying today. Like, we're just throwing some, seeds in the pond of thinking about what actually are some of the important things to think through. And I think potentially you can grow your revenue more by not having to focus on that area.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to an advisor just before we came online live, and this gentleman had his own license and now is licensed. So he decided to go, no, I don't want that side of things anymore. I'm going to go and run my own business away from 3 or 4 other business partners, and I'll just choose to be licensed because it feels like the right thing for where my business is at.
Mm,
And he was joking with me that he actually didn't realize how much time he'd spent on the RM responsibilities,
mm.
and those other things. And he said, Craig, I've got all these gaps in my day, and I'm kind of sitting here going, well, what do I do with those? And um, then I adjusted myself and said, well, I should actually see more clients. But it was a real shock for him as to how much time he actually had now that he wasn't doing those things.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
which again, Dean, like whether you've got your own AFSL or you don't, um, it's about how do you find the right support to maybe reduce some of those things on you.
Mm,
If it is in true the fact that the strategy for your business is that you want to keep growing and you want to see more clients.
absolutely. And so let's delve into that flexibility side then,
Yeah.
Craig, in terms of what it is. And obviously you run a dealer group, so there's that side. And so the the thing that interests me is that the fact that you can't yet define what the flexibility is that they're seeking. And so people will want to jump out of an environment that seems restrictive, which I can imagine calling dealer groups in, just putting them all into one bucket, is that
Yeah.
because they set rules for everyone, that is restrictive. And so therefore, if you go over and get your own license, you've got freedom because there's no one telling you what to do. Now, that's being the police officer and the speeding person at the same time, is that it's very difficult to police yourself as well. And
Yeah.
so when advisors might say, well, I'm really looking for additional freedom, if they're actually saying, well, I'd like to not do all the compliance things that my current licensee is making me do, I would ask the question on going, well, what things do you know that your current licensee is asking you to do that's not in the law?
Mm.
Because that's the bit that could potentially be how you're going to get additional flexibility. So if a licensee is making you do a 72-page fact find, for example, including asking for a dollop of blood as part of the process, now ASIC doesn't require all of those things, and so potentially that's being too restrictive, and so freedom could be not having to do that.
Yep.
But if freedom means, oh, I don't want to do my compliance obligations that are set by the regulator, well, that's not going to help at all. And so that's the interesting thing that in my journey, Craig, is that the free we didn't necessarily do it for freedom. I think we originally did it for the financials, i.e.,
Yep.
we could see our business growing. We ran some sums and actually said, well, actually, running our licensee is going to be cheaper than being within a license. Um, and that was true until I got my first law case. My first FOS case, and I can tell you that there was a very large legal fee that I paid through the process, as well as hundreds of hours of time spent working with my lawyer and FOS, for example. And it was FOS back then. That's how
Yep.
old it is. But it was a lot of hours that I invested that had I been in a dealer group, they would have taken some of that heavy lifting for me. Um, and it's just one example of what I wouldn't have had to worry about as much time investment. Now, over my journey of having to learn by doing in those particular cases, to learning what FDS was going to be and implementing systems in there. Now enhanced FDSs, now all these other things that we're having to learn, is that there's a bit of scale in the dealer group world that you don't get in self-licensed. And I think even if you buy all of the services
Yep.
from third parties, no one besides you is still responsible for making sure that 100% of it is done.
Yep.
It still relies on you as a responsible manager to um, to be able to sign off that everything is compliant, everything's been done as per needed.
Yep. It's funny. I actually remember another good friend of mine when as they were getting their own license, and we were supporting them through that process and that type of thing. And Dean, he said to me, "You know, the one thing that worries me is the day that I say I'll do that later, because
Mm.
no one's really making me do it now, and then
Yeah.
I just don't do it later."
Mm.
And he said that's the one thing that actually makes me fearful the most is
Yeah.
adding another layer of responsibility onto myself, um, to actually, make sure that I'm doing those things and getting those things done.
Mm.
Um, and again, I don't want to go on about that's not saying that you can't have your own license. It's really then what he was telling me was the opportunity cost of doing other stuff is me having to set up and make sure there's reminders and make sure there's things in place and stuff to do. Like, believe me, I know what you have to do.
Mm.
So it's but yeah, it's interesting as you keep looking at that shift. So Dean, now not having your own AFSL, what's that freed you up, other advisors up in the business? What's it like on the other side of that? And not necessarily about the, being in the license relationship, but what's happening for your business now that you've been able to do that perhaps maybe you couldn't do as well or as deep as you wanted?
Yeah, so a couple of things that in terms of how we run our financial planning businesses is we now feel more confident that we can call a friend and the friend will give us our answer, whether that is the compliance hotline to get the answer, or it's actually someone that will happily critique advice documents or templates that we have, that goes a little bit above and beyond because it's their license as opposed to a third party doing the work. So that's been quite good. We've definitely had the leverage of additional time within the businesses. So that has definitely helped us in terms of, I would say from my perspective that I was spending a day to sometimes 2 days a week in running the AFSL when we were this small dealer group of eight businesses at its peak. It was
Yep.
taking 2 days a week to run. It wasn't profitable. It was cost recovery at best, but it was taking 2 days a week of my time to run it. And that's flipping that over. I've got 2 days to running coaching and execution now in terms of other things that I can do, which frankly I'm better at. I enjoy more. I'm a happier person for not having to be responsible for the compliance elements of the dealer group.
Yep. Yep. And I
So
think
let's
it's
flip it, Craig, and now
okay.
let's be positive.
Let's be positive.
So we're trying to think about all of the things associated with being self-licensed, well, being licensed and my journey. But why? What are the other things that people are doing, talking to you about, or you've heard in really the motivation to why they want to go self-licensed? And I think an important context in terms of some people's thought process is that I don't think dealer groups are going away anytime soon. I.e., I don't think ASIC is going to take on the burden of individually authorizing all of the advisors. I don't
Yep,
think that's going away. And even if it does, you still need service providers to help you do things. So
correct.
self-license is not the solution associated with that. But what are we getting? What are we
Yep.
gaining from the client perspective or the advisor perspective by jumping into our own licensee?
Yeah, and look, mate, just to touch on that point you just made as well. Look, the self licensed, not having your own AFSL, but being individually licensed as an advisor is no doubt a theme that keeps getting spun around and around and around.
Mm,
And even in running, a licensee, I think that theme, um, I don't think there's anything wrong with that theme. But what I don't see at the moment is the conversation about what does the infrastructure look like to make that work? What is the programs that need to be put in place to make that work? How what are the plans? How are you going to track people? How are you going to hold people accountable? What
mm,
what is their compliance regime and all of those things look like, right? And that's the massive challenge to this. It's not actually the whole idea of being
mm.
individually licensed. It's the infrastructure and the costs
Well,
associated with making that work.
absolute. Yeah. So
Um,
ASIC's not going to do it for free. So there was, I
no.
think it was last year, a professional planner thing was talking about it. Be careful what we wish for in terms of having a direct relationship with the regulator, but it's definitely not going to be free. And the one story that I think and talk about in relation to this is that we will still have to get an audit certificate every year to prove that our advice was compliant. ASIC
Yep.
is not going to read my advice and work out it's compliant. So I'm still going to have to come to a service provider and actually have my files audited and then give me a certificate to show that my files are in order, and I would upload that to the ASIC portal. And so
Yep.
there's no saving there. Like there's no cost saving there really, in terms of audits and uploading it to the ASIC portal. So where's the advantage in doing it? We'll
Yeah,
wait
it's
and
an
see.
interesting one. We will wait.
And
We will wait and see on that. But to your question on why are people wanting their own license, and look, we support that within our business as well.
mm,
So we're not pro or con anything. It's again actually sitting down and going for your business and where you're at and the point in time that you're at. What is going to be the best operational method for you to achieve your goals?
mm,
I come back to flexibility though, mate. That is the number one thing that people are telling me right now is I want flexibility, and that is why I'm going to go and get my
mm,
own license. And my challenge to those people is again, what does flexibility mean? And really being able to actually articulate what flexibility means. Because I can tell you, 8 out of 10 people I ask that question actually look at me with a blank face and go,
mm.
Craig, that's a really good question. I really don't know,
But I still want
but I still want it.
it. Yeah,
And
and look, it's part of potentially that they don't want anyone else telling them what to do anymore. Like that is an
yeah,
element of flexibility and completely justifiable in individual businesses to go, look, I think I understand the rules, I'll follow them, and I don't want people looking over my shoulder all of the time, making sure that I am following the rules.
yep.
But that's absolutely the challenge and opportunity. But I'm not sure how much better the client journey is going to
Well,
be
that's a good
by
point,
by that outcome.
and that was gonna be my very point. What they actually mean when they say, "I want flexibility," is they're actually saying, "I wanna be able to be in a position where I don't feel overwhelmed by" what I would call, is a bit controversial, but what I would call lazy policy setting.
Mm,
And that's stacking layers upon layers on it, to deal with the lowest common denominator, to just make sure it's safe, versus policy setting that matches the Corps Act, that
mm,
that
mm,
therefore is sensible, and allows advisors to be comfortable. And I think this is the other thing: flexibility equals comfort, Dean. Right? And it's I want policy so that I can feel comfortable that I know I'm using the right advice document, I'm doing the right file notes, but I can not have that being my burden over actually seeing and looking after my clients.
Yeah.
And so whether it's my own AFSL or another person's AFSL, what I'm really looking for is smart and sensible policy that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable in doing something that I've done for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Which is I
And
want to see clients and I want to look after them and I want them to have good advice outcomes. So I think
yeah,
that
and well said.
really
Yeah.
the crux of it.
Yep. And I think the last thing in terms of if it's not, it's the client outcomes or the client journey for us has been exactly the same. I think there was a time when you could say that you were self-licensed and therefore you were independent of large financial institutions or not vertically aligned and all of those kind of things, which is not really the case now. Like, you can't say that. Obviously, we can't say those things, but also that perceived benefit of having your own license, clients don't really see it or understand it that much anyway, and it's not their main focus.
Yeah.
But the resourcing of AFSLs is a very interesting thing, and that's something that I had a chat. You and I and Nathan had a chat about
Yeah.
how AFSLs, some of them are not financially resourced enough to actually follow their obligations. So, be it following just even following the letter of the law, not doing anything above and beyond. But some of the smaller AFSLs potentially don't have the right financial resources or human capital resources to be doing all of the things that they need to do.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
I can
very
profess,
difficult to
right,
see.
to write smart policy that protects everyone actually takes a significant financial investment.
Mm,
So that you can
mm,
make sure that those policies are protecting the advisors, but allowing them, the framework to operate and run a business efficiently. Setting that type of policy actually takes a significant financial investment. It
yeah.
really does.
Yep.
But it's worthwhile, right? Because at the end of the day, you've got to keep that end consumer in mind,
Mm,
and it's them that we need to see all of the quality advisors that sit in the Australian market. Uh, to be able to get that done. So I think, Dean, like the important point we're trying to make today isn't about whether you should have your own AFSL or whether you should be licensed with someone else. It's to sit down with someone and do the exercise on what the opportunity cost looks
mm.
like for your business, and what the outcomes will actually be that you're trying to achieve, and drive and talk to your peers and work out really which is the best way to go, from
Yeah.
a business strategic perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should nothing should be done on price, although it's an okay
It's a
motivator.
temptation, right? But
It's a temptation. Um, but as Stella said, it's like it's easier and cheaper to go get one more client on the top than try to save the $6,000 on the bottom in terms of the dealer fees from our perspective in terms of what we've thought through now. But yeah, it's not always about the money. Sometimes it is. It's this desire to jump into flexibility, but often you don't know what you're jumping into. So I can
yep,
tell you that there's hundreds of pages of policies that get created by your consultant to get you the AFSL. And then there's all these other registers and policies that have to be maintained on an ongoing basis. Sure, you can pay someone to give you up to date versions of those things. You can pay someone to do almost anything, just like clients pay us for financial advice. But the it's that opportunity cost. So yeah, speak to a friend, speak to Craig or myself, and go, what was our actual journey like being being self-licensed, being running a small dealer group, to coming full circle back into a larger dealer group. And I kind of, not that I need another 10 years to prove that I was right, maybe, Craig, but I was 10 years early in terms of the journey into being self-licensed. And then maybe I'm 10 years early on coming back to this side of the ledger
maybe, yeah.
as well. But yeah, like I think we're open to talking to anyone to have a conversation to go, look, been thinking about it. Good. Let me tell you the journey. And I think that's really important to do. Everyone would have a conversation. If you're thinking about joining a dealer group, you would talk to other advisors within the dealer group. When you're thinking about setting up an AFSL, you should actually talk to other advisors that have run and closed down their AFSL to make sure. The last thing I'll talk about, Craig, something that we weren't aware of when we started the AFSL, but came aware of along the way, is PI insurance. So when you broadly, when you close your AFSL, you'll be paying for runoff cover in order to close down the AFSL and move somewhere else. And the way they calculate runoff cover at the moment is six times last year's premium. So it doesn't run off like the term may term. The risk may run off, but the premium's not. So that's another big thing of paying 6 years premium up front to close your AFSL. That's an exit cost to get out of licensee world. Honestly, it's something that we weren't told at the start. We didn't know until well into the journey that we were going to pay a very large exit fee associated with that. So that's just a mindful as well as go, what does it cost me to set up my AFSL? But if it's wrong, what does it cost me to get out?
Yep. No, mate, they're definitely all things to be considered. So thank you for sharing some of those insights of what you've been through today. Now, Dean, Uncommon Sense number 12, which is a fortnight away. For the first time ever, we're going to be interviewing someone. We're bringing a guest into the show. Now, I don't think we released today who it is, but we just throw out there.
We'll build a bit of momentum. Yeah, we'll build a little bit of a momentum, but we're obviously trialing what it's going to be like to have 3 on the screen at the same time. A little bit heading towards the Brady Bunch, but yeah, we're really excited to have a guest on to be talking about the front end story of your financial planning businesses, and so we'll be launching more information about that during the week to get ready for 2 weeks' time. So yeah, definitely look forward to that one, Craig.
Yeah, can't wait. And with that, if there's anyone that wants to be a guest on Uncommon Sense, all you have to do is ask. So,
I believe there's a queue, but the queue wouldn't be that long. But we do make people line up nonetheless.
We do,
good
mate,
English style. So thanks very much, Craig. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Cheers,
Bye.